Alright everybody, it's been a bit since I've done one of these videos, but with the addition of credit kiting to the card pool, I was interested in making a video about these install helper cards, as I like to call them, since we now have access to 3 different types of them, and almost all of them are criminal for some reason. But we have career fair slash modded, credit kiting, and the supplier. And basically all 3 of these cards assist you in installing things in some way and give you some kind of discount. But with all these different varieties running around, it can be a little difficult to figure out which one applies to your deck the best and which ones will be the most useful. So sit back, relax, and let's get into that. Okay, so first and foremost, in order to be able to properly utilize these cards in your deck, you need to be able to properly assess how much value you're actually going to get out of them. And each one comes with certain deck building constraints to get the most use out of it. But as a general rule for any econ card you put in any deck, in order for that card to be worth the deck slots and worth its value for putting into your deck, putting X copies of that card into your deck should be worth at least putting that same number of copies of Sure Gamble or Hedge Fund into your deck. Because we all know that's like the benchmark of a playable econ card. So you should be getting at least that much value out of these other cards. They should be comparable in order to be worth putting in your deck. So just call it the Sure Gamble test. In fact, I'm going to trademark that myself right now. The Sure Gamble test. Copyright me. But to make things simple, let's start off with the most straightforward of the cards in question. That would be the career fair and or modded, which do effectively the exact same thing just for different targets. Career fair for resources, modded for programs or hardware. But they both function the same. They're 0 to play, and they say install something from your hand for -3 credits cost. So in total value of these cards, you effectively gain 3 credits and also save a click, since you played 2 cards at once. You gain the money and you install the other card at the same time. So the net value of these cards is 3 credits and a click, which means that in order to compare them to Sure Gamble, they do stack up. They do pass the Sure Gamble test, since that extra click can be anything. It can be a run, it can be a draw, or whatever you want it to be, but at the very bare bones minimum, it's a click for a credit. So at the very bare bones minimum, playing this card, installing something, and clicking for a credit is the same value as playing a Sure Gamble and then installing something. So for each copy of this that you play in your deck, you save a click and you gain 3 credits. So let's assume, on average, you see 2 copies of this in a game. So you're probably not going to draw through your entire deck every single game. So let's say that on average you find 2 copies of this. So that means on average this card is going to net you a net gain of 2 clicks and 6 credits, which, assuming you use those clicks to just click for credits, it's 8 credits. So putting 3 copies of this in your deck, the average net value added to your deck is going to be about 8 credits. So let's just call it that, because we need some kind of average value to compare to the other cards that we're comparing it to see if it's worth using that or the other ones. And of course, this one has the restriction that you have to have something else in your hand to install at the time. You can't just use it whenever you see it. So you do need not an enormous amount, but you do want a pretty solid number of cards that this will be usable with in your deck. So this is the one that is the easiest to understand and also has the easiest requirement to be useful. Now, after that, we have the supplier, which is honestly my personal favorite of the group, but delving into the usefulness of this particular card is a lot more complicated than it at first seems. So on its face, it's a click and 3 credits to install it. Then you spend a click to install resources or hardware onto it, and beginning your turn you install one of the things on it at -2 credits cost. So comparing this to, let's say, the previous example, career fair, this costs extra credits to use, whereas career fair / modded saves you credits. and the discount is smaller. It also takes an extra turn for it to happen. You don't get to install something right away. However, obviously, this is not one-time use. It stays out for the entire game, and you can keep using it over and over again, so the value stacks up. So the thing with Supplier is that, assuming you install something off of it every single turn, it is very comparable to daily casts, because it's a resource that's 3 to install, and it effectively drips you 2 credits each turn. So Supplier, the ideal Supplier where you're installing something every turn is very, very comparable to daily casts. So in order for it to be better than daily casts, it obviously needs to install more than 4 things, because if it installs 4 things, it's the same as daily casts. So here's the thing though, Supplier is something you only need 1 of. All the other examples, including daily cast to compare it to that, you draw a copy, you throw it down. Supplier, you only need 1 copy out, the other 2 copies are blank. So that 1 copy you do draw and install needs to get an enormous amount of value out of it compared to spending those 3 deck slots on some other economy source. So I would say that in order for your 1 copy of Supplier to be worth, that you have on the field, in order for those 3 copies to be put in your deck so that the one you have on the field gets appropriate value to be worth the deck slots, you would need to install, at bare minimum, 7 things off of the Supplier, because that will get you a total saved amount of money of 11 credits, which is A, more than 2 copies of daily casts, so that 1 copy is getting you more value than the average of seeing 2 copies of daily casts, and that's also just barely short of enough that those 3 copies of Supplier will give you value equal to 3 copies of Hedge Fund. But in order for the Supplier to be useful, you have to have a very large critical mass of at least 2 cost resources and hardware in your deck for it to install. Right, because installing 7 things on the Supplier is not a small order. That's a lot of stuff. But if you were going to make a Supplier deck, you need to have enough stuff in your deck that the Supplier can use that you are very, very, very consistently and very easily installing a bare minimum of like 7 or 8 things every game. Every game you should be installing at least 7 or 8 things on the Supplier. More than that, better, obviously. But if you cannot hit at least that minimal number so that your copies of the Supplier, are equivalent or better than daily casts, then put some other econ card in your deck. So now to compare this to Career Fair or Modded, you would then need a minimum of at least 6 things on the Supplier, which would gain you a net value of 9 credits, to equal having hit 2 copies of Career Fair or Modded, which has gained you our previously mentioned net value of about 8 credits. So again, if you're considering a Supplier versus Career Fair or Modded, you might need to do some testing for your deck, but you need to be able to bare minimum 7 or 8 things, otherwise just go with Career Fair or Modded. So there are a few other tweaks to using the Supplier. Drawbacks are obviously the delayed install, also having to see it as soon as humanly possible in your deck. If you're running a Supplier deck and you don't see the Supplier early, it really sucks. So you need a way to see it very, very early in the game. But the benefits of the Supplier, besides it being out forever, is that once you find that first copy, you're good to go. The other examples of Career Fair and credit kiting, they're one-shots. Supplier stays out forever. So that is a lot of consistency, and the decks that I've used with Supplier in it, that consistency is very, very welcome in setting up your rig. The other thing is that while Career Fair needs things that cost at least 3, credit kiting needs things that are super expensive, Supplier can install things that are only 2 cost. And that hits a lot of niche examples that are really, really nice to install for free. So like installing your Underworld contacts for free, installing your turning wheels for free, your feedback filters for free, your cheap consoles or hardware for free. Installing sports hoppers for 1 feels amazing with the Supplier. But as a sheer source of econ, in order to put this card in your deck, you need a huge amount of things that are compatible with it. So you need a big critical mass to play. If you're going to try it, play a couple of test games, and if you are not hitting at least 7 or 8 things on the Supplier in every or nearly every game, then it's not worth it. So that's how the Supplier works, basically. And last but not least, we have the newest addition to these types of cards, and that is credit kiting. So this one is pretty awkward, honestly, compared to the other ones. And it might be a bit of a trap compared to how excited people originally were about it when it first had it. So here's the thing about this card. What most people see when they look at credit kiting is that it's 0 to play and you get to install something for 8 credits less. So people think that this is an econ card worth 8 credits, but that is not the case. So here's the thing. It gives you a tag, so you have to remove the tag. It requires a run on a central server, so you have to make that run. So bare minimum, playing credit kiting requires a run, playing the card, and removing the tag, and costing 2 credits. So this is not a single operation with 0 cost. This is a triple operation that costs 2 to play. So when you look at this card, that is what you should see. That is how you should consider it in your deck. That credit kiting is a triple event that costs 2 to play. That's what you should treat it as. And in that respect, since it saves you 8 but it costs you 2 and it takes 3 clicks, that means the optimal maximized net value of credit kiting is 3 clicks to gain 6 credits, or value of 6 credits, which is 3 Mopus clicks. So at maximum value, it is 3 Mopus clicks, which is not a bad thing. Now, it does boast the most flexibility of any of the cards because it can install literally any card. But it also has some of the tightest restrictions on using it. That run on a central server can be a lot more of a hurdle to get over than you might think at first. So, first of all, you have to make that run. And that run needs to be used for something other than just triggering the card. Ideally, dirty laundry. That's mostly what you want. You want a dirty laundry, or or some run event or something that helps you in some way, so that you can stack the clicks to play this. But more importantly, it requires a completely empty central server for you to go after. Because here's the thing, in order for this card to be worth its value, remember the Sure Gamble test, in order for this to pass the Sure Gamble test, you pretty much need a completely empty server. The 2 things that you can use to try to help this card in case that's not available is you can use Special Order in case you don't have the thing you're trying to install, like you're trying to install a Femme Fatale or something. So let's assume that you use Special Order to get a card in your hand that costs at least 8 credits. So you have a click to make the run, assume that run costs you nothing. Then you have a click to play the Special Order and a credit. Then you play credit kiting, then you remove the tag. So for your entire turn of 4 clicks, you have spent 3 credits to play Special Order and remove the tag to install something that would normally cost 8. So you have saved, well, not 9 because 8 plus the Special Order credit. So you have saved 6 credits. So that sounds good, right? That sounds like you've made your maximum value of the card. Except what if you sent those same 4 credits just clicking for credits? So let's say you Special Order, install the thing that costs 8, that's 9, then you spend the last 2 clicks clicking for 2 credits. That brings you down to 7 net value. So instead of spending 3 to do it, you've spent 7 to do it. So in that case that you Special Order and can run for nothing, you are still saving 4 credits with that combo, which is your Sure Gamble, so that's still worth it. But again, that considers that you spent nothing on that run. Suppose they have ice on all their servers, and now you're like, well, I'll inside job something so I can get that run. Well, you better steal an agenda with that inside job then, because that's an extra card and an extra 2 credits. So again, we use the value that whatever it is you're targeting with credit kiting, it costs at least 8, let's say it costs exactly 8 credits, so you get the full value. So you inside job, which costs you 2. You play credit kiting, install the 8 cost thing for 0, and then you have to remove the tag on your third click. So that costs you a grand total of 3 clicks and 4 credits in order to install something that would have cost 8. So you then saved 4 credits. And you might think, well, that sounds worth it, right? You said the sure gamble test. That makes it worth it, right? 3 clicks, you saved 4. 3 clicks, you saved 4 credits doing all that stuff. Except that you could have used that same 3 clicks just to install that 8 cost card straight up, and just clicked for 2 credits, which means you net value is 6. So you saved 2 credits just installing it and clicking for credits, whereas you saved 4 credits by using that card and using that card, the 2 cards, and using that whole combo. So even though using inside job seems to make it pass a sure gamble test, it doesn't actually, because using credit kiting only saved you 2 credits versus just installing it straight up and clicking for credits normally. So it's not worth it if you are using a card, much less 2 cards for the inside job, just to save 2 credits over clicking for credits normally. It's not worth it. So the biggest hurdle to make credit kiting useful is you absolutely need something that costs at least 8 credits to install. You want the maximum value out of the thing that you're installing for free. And you also need to be able to make a run on a central server for $0. Or at the very least get some kind of substantial value out of that central server run if you're spending anything for it. Because as soon as you have to spend even as much as 2 credits making a central server run, credit kiting really, really, really does not become worth the deck slots, especially because you will very, very rarely, if ever, use this more than once in a game. So it's something that can be shut off. If it ever gets popular, it can be shut off really hard by just early on icing all 3 servers. So I'm not saying don't use credit kiting, but I'm saying if you're going to use credit kiting, in order to get maximum value out of it, in order to get value that is worth putting into your deck, you need to be able to make runs on a central server for $0 or maybe $1 at most. And you also need something that costs the full 8 credit discount, which when you can pull that off, awesome. But when you can't pull that off, it's a really bad dead card, because now you can't use it, and now you have something that's really expensive sitting in your hand that you can't install. Yeah, it may not be as amazing as it feels to get the full value of that off. It may not actually be that great. It may be kind of a trap if the opponent is wise enough to just ice all their servers. Plus, there's the fact that you will very rarely ever use it more than once, and because you want to see it early game, so that the earlier in the game, the less likely the corp has ice servers, so that you can get that free server and get the full value out of it. You want more copies of it. It's got that problem where you want more copies of it in your decks. You'll see it early, but the more copies that are in your deck, the more wasted copies there are, because you're probably not going to use this more than once. So 2 copies of credit kiting seems ideal, but you're probably not going to use one of them. So it's not bad, but I think unless you're doing something very specific with credit kiting, it doesn't really measure up to the Supplier and Career Fair / modded like you might have assumed it would. Phew, alright, anyway, so there you have it. There's 3 in-depth analysis of 3 different varieties of install aid type cards. So even though I kind of just took a dump on credit kiting for a bit, all 3 of these have their appropriate use in the right kind of deck. You just have to build around them the correct way. So take a look at these 3 things. If you're planning on building a deck that uses them, take a look at these 3 things. Understand which one fits your deck the best, or which one would be most beneficial to build your deck around, and then go with that. Don't just shove 3 copies of credit kiting into your deck because you think it's cool. So if you're going to use cards like these, this video was meant to help you understand how to properly assess their value and understand how to use them correctly. So thank you and good night.